this is all over social media at the moment. The behaviour of one of the guys on Love Island on ITV2 has prompted a women's charity to raise concerns about what they call emotionally abusive behaviour on the show. Now, this all centres around Adam and Rosie and a chat between them on Tuesday night. If you haven't been glued to the telly, let me explain for you. Basically, Rosie told him that she was heartbroken and on the verge of tears, explaining how she felt about him turning his attentions away from her and towards a new girl who just arrived on the show. And his response wasn't to apologise or wasn't to particularly understand, really. He smirked and suggested that it was her. She'd misinterpreted the way things were. Here's a flavour of it.
I trusted you when I shared that night with you. And you've literally just had what you wanted and ditched me 12 hours later. You trick girls into thinking that you're in here for a serious relationship. You're not. You're in here to rack up your numbers, Adam. You've let me literally break my heart today. And you sit here now and you're still cocky, you're still smug about it. And yes, I'm the person that's in the wrong.
That's Rosie and Adam on Love Island, made by ITV Productions for ITV2. Well, Katie Ghose is the chief executive of the charity Women's Aid. Katie, hello.
Hello.
Hi. And Honey Lancaster-James is a psychologist and relationship expert, has previously been the on-set psychologist on Love Island. Honey, hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. Katie, talk me through, first of all, that was a very, very small part of a longer conversation. What are your concerns about it?
That's right. First of all, I just thought it was fantastic that Rosie challenged what she didn't like about Adam's behaviour, and it started a conversation about what's a healthy relationship, what's an unhealthy relationship. Obviously, this is reality TV, it's not real life, but some of the things in Adam's behaviour that leapt out at me are troubling if they happen in real life and if they go unchecked and if they're part of a repeated pattern. So it's this thing about putting all the blame on your girlfriend, even for the relationship itself and what's going wrong there. Everything's her fault. And also starting to say that things happened or didn't happen that make them question their reality. And in the most serious cases in real life, the victim will actually question their own sanity. So those are some of the things which obviously we're not labelling any of what's happening on reality TV as actual relationships. It's not. But it has started an important conversation about what a healthy relationship should look like.
And it's probably worth saying as well, because it was vaguely touched on in that clip, Honey, but when Rosie referred to them having spent the night together, they let me think of the best way to put this. They didn't go all the way, but they had been intimate. So there was some background, it sounds strange to say history when it was so recent, but you know what I mean. It wasn't just that she liked him and he didn't like her back. They had been quite close up until that point.
Yes, but I think actually to a certain extent that's largely irrelevant, because whether something had happened between them or it hadn't, what was really key about that interaction was that Rosie was saying, hey, this is not okay for me. This is how I feel. This is the emotional effect that your actions have had on me. And what I think is concerning, and I think it was really right to point out that first and foremost, this is a reality TV show. And, you know, having worked on one of the series, you have to understand that hundreds of hours of footage are filmed, and a small amount of that makes it onto the TV, and it can make things look a certain way. You know, that's nothing malicious in that. It's just part of the process. So we have to be very careful that we're not pointing the finger at any one individual and saying, hey, what you did was abusive. But I think you're right that it is a really important conversation to have. And that's because if you say to somebody, this is how I feel, this is the impact on me that your behaviour has had, the appropriate and healthy response in any relationship, and this is whether it is from a man to a woman, from a woman to a man, any kind of relationship, the appropriate response is to show some empathy and compassion and understanding for what that person is communicating to you, not to respond with, oh, well, you know, you're wrong to feel that way, or actually it's all in your head, or, you know, your viewpoint on this is invalid. And I think this is the important conversation to have, is that I think one of the problems is, especially when you see shows that depict relationships among quite young people who perhaps immature in the way that they interact, people start to go, oh, that's just normal behaviour, or, oh, you know, guys act like that. No, that is not normal behaviour, and it's not healthy behaviour. What is normal normal for human to human relationships is to validate and show empathy and compassion for someone else's feelings, regardless of whether you agree with why they came about.
I mean, obviously, this is not a real life situation, as both of you have touched on. Does that make us, honey, in general, more likely to act differently if we know that we're being filmed, if we know that it's a competition, essentially? Can we, I don't know, I'm not trying to excuse away bad behaviour, far from it, but will that be having an impact, do you think?
Undoubtedly, the very unique set of circumstances of taking part in a reality TV show will have an impact and an effect on the way all of the people involved interact. That's a given. I don't think that's the same as saying, we excuse particular behaviours because of that. It's just to be mindful of the fact that this is a unique situation. And certainly there's an element of competition here. And some people have been saying, that his behaviour is more about him being so hyper-focused on doing what it takes to stay in the show and try and win the show, that it's almost leading to him not treating the other people involved in that environment in the way perhaps he would in real life. Who knows? We don't know that. Only him and his real life relationships will know that. I think what's important is that it stimulates a conversation about what people might see, that they go, oh, this happens in my relationship, or actually I've got somebody who's always telling me my feelings aren't valid, or when I get upset they tell me I'm being oversensitive, or it's all in my head, or actually it's come about through my behaviour, and that doesn't feel legitimate, and that feels wrong. And I think if this kind of situation stimulates those conversations, then that's a good thing, as long as we do recognise that this particular episode has arisen out of a very unique set of circumstances on a reality TV show.
A unique set of circumstances, yes, absolutely, and a TV show that as well. But I suppose what we have at the heart of it, Katie, ultimately is a woman in Rosie who was very upset by it.
What was great was that she called it out, and that's what we need to do. All of us, we can play our part. Domestic abuse happens behind closed doors. It's still in the shadows. And I talk to survivors of domestic abuse every day of the week who say they felt they'd been made to feel that they were the one to blame. They were trapped in a controlling, abusive relationship. They'd often had contact denied with their friends and family, so they were very isolated and they were feeling very alone. So I hope we can break the silence through a television programme which is shining a spotlight on unhealthy behaviour in some ways, healthy behaviour in others. It's starting the conversation, and you shouldn't feel that you should suffer in silence if you're questioning your relationship. If you're worried about your relationship, if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you're thinking about is how can I not aggravate my partner today? How can I keep myself and my kids safe? There is help out there for you.
Andrea in Liverpool says it shouldn't be the norm when teenage girls are watching this. And I suppose that's part of it as well, Katie, isn't it? The fact that and there are a couple of people saying, oh, who cares about the people on Love Island? But that entirely misses the point, really, doesn't it? Because these are human beings ultimately, and role models, and in the homes of a lot of teenage girls every day, every night, teenage boys, well, not just teenagers, but people look to this for influencers. Let's be honest about it. They do. It has an impact on them.
It does have an impact and an influence. And it's one of the reasons why we're applauding Rosie for calling the behaviour out, because it's really important that younger viewers in particular, they might not have had a relationship yet. They might be thinking this is normal or acceptable. It's not acceptable to want to control your partner and have all the power of them, and Rosie really called that out, and she called a spade, and she called that out. And power and control is at the heart of domestic abuse. This is what survivors of domestic abuse tell us time and time again, and we want everybody to live a life free of fear and free from abuse. That's what we're all about.
Honey, if there are women or men equally out there who are watching that and who are starting to maybe question their own relationships as a result, what do you do next? What advice can you give them?
Oh, well, first of all, I would 100% echo everything that you just said. I mean, certainly contacting, organisations such as Women's Aid. I mean, they're a fantastic organisation. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I am very familiar with their work and the way that they are available to women to call up. But there are other charities as well. I would certainly educate yourself. I think that's one of the great things that does come out of shows like this, where we watch this kind of behaviour and we see it, and then we see people protesting about it, talking about it in the media. I think you're absolutely right to flag up that Rosie did the right thing in standing up and saying, no, this is not acceptable. I think that is a great role model for young people. I'm mindful to just note that this doesn't always happen. It's not always the case that men are the controlling ones in an unhealthy relationship dynamic, although it's common. We know about the statistics around domestic abuse. It is important to note that it can be of both genders, I think, but it's very helpful that, these kinds of shows bring up these conversations and allow for enlightenment and allow people to say, that's the kind of relationship I don't want, and this is what to do when it happens. So reach out, get some support, do use those charities, do call Women's Aid if that's appropriate for you. And at the same time, ask yourself, is this a relationship that is actually supportive for my life? Is it helping me? Is it making me feel happy? Is it making me feel supported and well? Or is it causing me to question myself, making me feel low in my self-esteem? Is it making me feel controlled? Is it making me feel invalidated? And if it is, then you really need to think about what you can do to get out of that relationship, because I promise you that healthy relationships are possible and they are available to you. And I think one of the problems is that sometimes people do normalize these behaviors, or perhaps it's normal for them from something that's happened in their past. And it's really important to recognize that it's not normal, it's not healthy, and you can engage with people who will validate and respect your feelings.
Thank you both. Honey Lancaster-James, previously the on-set psychologist on Love Island, her blog as well, if you want to read, is called Life and How to Love It. And thanks, Katie, as well. Katie Ghose, she's the chief executive of the charity Women's Aid. This text says, where was the girl's compassion and empathy for the doctor guy at the start when the girls isolated him? As we were saying, it goes both ways.